Yeah, it's disappointing. There's pollution everywhere. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. I mean, Canada is a first world country. Mexico is a third world country, and you go down to the sites and you can't distinguish the difference. And it's a terrible thing, but that's the way it is. And hopefully, as lawyers, we can change that.
The Commission for Environmental Cooperation, established under NAFTA, has been doing some wonderful work in terms of learning how increased trade affects the environment. So there's been a lot of progress going on. It's just not yet reflected in any agreements or hard law.
We went to the Commission for Environmental Cooperation in the morning, which is a trilateral organization developed under the Environmental Side Agreement from the NAFTA. And the purpose of the CEC, well, one of the purposes is to get civic involvement. So it allows for actual individual could go and file a complaint with the CEC, and they will take a certain, whatever the complaint is, they will see if Canada is failing to enforce its environmental laws.
Under Canadian environmental law, one you have to understand is fish are more protected than people. The Fisheries Act of Canada is a very strong piece of legislation. It was adopted in the 70s when the government didn't know any better. And they adopted this very strong piece of legislation. It simply states that you cannot discharge a deleterious substance in waters frequented by fish.
Daniel Green filed a complaint with the CEC because he believed that Canada was not enforcing its Fisheries Act, and the river was very polluted. So he wanted us to go out into the river. So that day we walked a couple of miles down to the river. Then we actually got into the water, put on our plastic boots, and took a couple of samples. And then all of a sudden we see authorities coming, so we had to quickly leave. Daniel didn't want to leave. The people from the CEC had to eventually leave before we did because it was just bad publicity on their part. So finally we left. We convinced Daniel to leave. Then we walked back to his office, and we were gonna do some experiments on the water that we had collected to see if there was pollution, which there was. And it's just a good experience, and Daniel Green was just crazy character who's very passionate about the environment.
It's very, very rare where you see the seep. You see this line. You see the seep line. It's coming off. If I were to dig right in there, I would hit oil. Piece of oil.
But I'm an activist. I'm doing my part. It was my first time being an environmental activist. We're going to take some samples, some toxic waste, and then go back to the lab and see how much toxins are in there.
These booms are removed during the winter. Why? Because these booms are expensive. And during the ice flows with this current would rip the booms away. So of course City of Montreal doesn't want to buy new booms. So the booms are removed during the winter. There's no containment here during the winter. So from November until April, no containment whatsoever. And with this current, and you see the plume, I mean, this oil, all this oil here, this is going to go right under the skirt and head downstream.
Daniel Green, I wouldn't say he was angry. He just seemed like he was very passionate about the environment, but kind of in a one-track mind. And yes, he was angry with the government for not enforcing its laws and for letting the river get so bad. I don't think he was there to hurt anybody. He just really wanted to make a change and was so frustrated with the slow-moving process that he just kind of wanted to take matters into his own hand.
These booms don't contain anything. This is why I call them idiot booms.
We just wanted to see what was out there, just to see to take in Techno Park from, you know, a different perspective, from not just reading it in the book, but just going out there and seeing, you know, observing it firsthand and taking the samples and seeing the pollution for ourselves.
So what I usually do here is I usually do multiple types of sampling. I have bottles for oils and greases, for PCBs, and I also sample the earth right at the closest I can get to the water line. All these chemicals are being analyzed both by us and by, of course, government officials. The government knows about the site. They've been to the site. I have been here with a TV crew where a guy from Environment Quebec, our environment department, was parked right up there, and we're just standing there. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm coming to visit the Technopark site." He says, "Why did you come down here?" And he says, "Well, I didn't bring my boots." He says, "I'll lend you my boots." And he says, "Well, are you going to take a sample?" I said, "I didn't bring my sample bottles." "I'll lend you a goddamn sample bottle." I said, "You're going to take a picture?" He says, I don't have my camera." I says, "Borrow mine. I'll email you the goddamn picture."
The smell combined with the polluted water, I mean, the water wasn't clear, it was black. I mean, and when you go down there and you kind of stand on the rocks and you could see like the edges of the water, I mean, it's all black. There's really thick substance there. I don't even know what it is, but I mean, it looked like, kind of had the same feel as oil. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't oil, but that's what it was like.
And so it's almost like it's see no pollution, smell no pollution, and talk no pollution. Why?
It was just completely black and thick. It was really...
I think it is oil.
It is oil? Oh.
Okay, so we've contaminated ourselves enough this morning, and now we're going to go back.
So the culture that's out there right now is people just don't recognize that we are interconnected with, with the earth. There's no respect for animals. There's no respect for, anything environmental anymore. People just think that since we are at the top of the food chain, that we could do whatever we want. They don't realize that we are dependent on, the whole earth that's around us. We're one species among many, and we share this earth. And right now we're living a lifestyle like, we're the only ones that live here. And if we continue down that path, then we're not going to have an earth to live in.
The rest of the world is much more advanced than we are, at least on their environmental thinking. And, just the U.S. could be a leader, but it's not. It's chosen not to be a leader.
But I'm an activist. I'm doing my part.
It's urgent. It's urgent. I mean, we got like 10 to 15 years to make massive changes. And that's, I'm just not sure we're up to that task. Yeah.